It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Steve Bilt, the CEO at Smile Brands Inc., SBI, and OneSmile LLC. He co-founded Smile Brands in 1998 and OneSmile in 2015, and in 2016 combined the two businesses. Steve was integral in Smile Brand Inc.'s three initial platform acquisitions and led the acquisitions of Monarch Dental Corp. In 2003 and Castle Dental Centers in 2004. In addition to these transactions, Steve oversaw the development and operationalization of 150 de novo practices at Smile Brands and each one of OneSmile platform acquisitions. Steve also serves as chairman of the Smiles for Everyone Foundation. Smile Brands and OneSmile have 5,500 employees and affiliated providers in approximately 400 locations across the United States. The Smiles for Everyone Foundation has established international outposts serving 6 countries in South America, Asia, Africa, and conducts ongoing events throughout the United States. My gosh, all my homies listening to you right now, they find it so hard just to manage their own office. And then here's a guy like you managing 400 offices. And I think that these are amazing podcasts because it might be a young kid wanting to meet the CEO of because you guys are the only ones really providing jobs to all of our graduates, and I have to thank corporate dentistry for providing so many jobs for our colleagues when they get out of school. But then the other ones have started their own office, and my gosh, just think all they could learn about how to manage their own office from a guy who's managing 400. So they probably want to know, what the hell do you eat every morning? Is it Wheaties?
Well, it's interesting, Howard. I think the big challenge is, someone who's thinking about running a dental office doesn't think about being their own dental assistant. They don't think about being their own office manager. They don't think about being their own receptionist. But then when they run multiple dental offices, you go from 1 to 2, that's hard because you've figured out the division of labor and how to run one dental office very successfully. You go to 2 and you tend to just work harder, run faster. When people go to 3, you can't divide yourself that many times. When you get to 400, I'm not doing everything. I mean, quite frankly, I'm not doing it near everything. Some would say I do very little if things are going well, right? Because we have experts in every area. Just like you have a superstar receptionist or a superstar office manager, it makes perfect sense. We have superstars running multiple offices and superstars running regions and superstars running central business offices and call centers. And so it's really, my job tends to be more about organizational design and development than it does, quote unquote, doing everything. So if I'm doing a really good job building our team and developing our organization so that we have experts in every area, then it's really no different than anyone else's job. That's just what I have to focus on. And that hopefully becomes an area of expertise. What weaves that all together becomes culture, and I'll talk a lot about that whenever you ask me almost anything about building a business.
How long have you been in dentistry?
1998 is when we started, May of 1998. So we're going to, next year, we'll have a very exciting May of 2018 to celebrate a big anniversary for us.
That'll be your 20-year anniversary.
Yep, 20 years in dentistry.
So what percent of the U.S. dental market was corporate dentistry in 1998, and what is it now? What has it done in 20 years?
It's always a little bit of an elusive estimate to make, but back then we were estimating about 1.5–2% was what you'd call, organized in the DSO world. Now, just members of the ADSO, right, the Association of Dental Support Organizations, represent about 8% of the industry. And then there's lots of smaller, as you know, folks who have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 offices. So my guess is that same 2% back from 98 is probably pushing between 15 and 20% right now.
So you thought it was 2% in 98, and you think it's what percent now?
It's probably pushing close to 20 now.
20%? Oh, but you said now 8% of the dentists are members of DSO.
8% of the DSO, 8% of the industry is represented by members of the ADSO, the Association of Dental Support Organizations. So the ADSO members are about 8%, give or take, of the sector. And then my guess is about 2x that or better is smaller DSOs.
So where's the ADSO located?
No, that's the Association of Dental Support Organizations.
Yeah.
So that's the industry trade group for the DSOs.
Right.
So,
Where are they in Chicago too, like the ADA, and where are they located?
No, it's a small organization that's more volunteer led, so and some professionals, right? So across the industry. So it has an executive board made up of the leadership of the DSOs and then an executive director.
So it's gone. So in 20 years, it's basically gone from 2% of the market to 20% of the market. So that's 2018. So let's go to 2038, 20 more years. So it's gone from 2 to 20. What do you think it'll go from in the next 20 years? Do you think it'll go from 20% to what?
It's a really good question where the logical end of that exponential growth rate is. There's one way to think about it in my perspective is there's always a place for what DSOs do and the level of support they provide for dentists. And there's always going to be a place for private practice dentists. And I also think the industry is going to organize other ways as technology advances for private practices to continue to be more and more competitive. Your forum is a great place for them to share best practices. There'll be ways to do purchasing less expensively. There'll be lots of tools and techniques to develop more competitively. And the smaller, I don't want to use the word boutique, but the private practice mentality is always going to be something that lots of consumers respond well to. So I think there's a place for everyone in the industry. And I think the biggest opportunity, as is the percentage of the country that's not in regular care. That's the horrible part, right? So you talk about it all the time, add 6.5 years to somebody's life treating perio disease, and then throw that up against a stat that 45% of the country saw a dentist last year. The opportunity is to create more.
What percent saw a dentist?
The ADA stats I saw, 45% of the country saw the dentist last year.
So more than half didn't even go to the dentist.
Didn't even go to the dentist. So you think about the opportunity for all of us. The opportunity for all of us is to raise that number. It's a critical, obviously, overall health issue. And you think about DSOs opening up, hopefully, part of the market for other folks. You think about private practices doing that. You think of all of us working together to raise that bar. That's the real big opportunity. It's not a scarcity mentality, fighting over a fixed pie. It's all about expanding that pie, creating more and more awareness, getting more and more people engaged in the category through lots of efficient models. I think of it kind of like, you can go to any industry you want, go to retail, go to restaurants, right? You don't think of retail as a single category. You don't go, who's a better retailer, Walmart or Nordstrom, right? You go, well, what are you looking for, right? Are you looking for something very value driven? Are you looking for something very unique, right? And then you think about the category based on the consumers that want to access it. That's how I think about dentistry. Dentistry hasn't created models so that everyone is accessing it. And that's a huge opportunity for all of us, in my opinion.
And also within those industries, sometimes your Walmart shopper will go to Nordstrom's for a prom dress. Sometimes you go to Taco Bell because you only want to eat 2 quick tacos for $1. And sometimes you go to a sit-down Mexican restaurant for $7 for 2 tacos. I want to say one more thing that I like about corporate. Isn't the oldest corporate dental DSMO Affordable Dentures?
It's an interesting question. I don't know how far back they go.
I think they go. Can you look up when was Affordable Dentures started?
Affordable goes way back, and then Western out here in California goes back. I think they can trace their roots back about 100 years, actually.
Yeah, they're both 100 years old. But one thing I want to point out to my homies is that what I loved about Affordable Dentures is dentistry has always had a problem of focusing on the middle class, the suburbs, and the rich. And Affordable Dentures saw this total neglect for all these poor areas. And Western Dental in California, everybody wanted to go to Beverly Hills. Western said, well, there's a lot of poor areas. I see Aspen doing that today. Aspen purposely focusing on underserved poor areas. So there's a lot of great business acumen. How many corporate DSMOs are there? How many?
It's a great question. The ADSO is about 35 members. I think then that it's how you classify it from there. So I have no doubt there's 100 of them. out there of varying sizes. My guess is it's probably a significantly higher number than that.
So
It's
you
really
guys are the big boys, and how many? What would be the fewest number of locations for the smallest one of those ADSO members, those
the
35 members?
ADSO numbers probably in the 15 to 20 range is probably the bottom of
15 to
that.
20? Okay.
Yeah, it's probably the bottom of that list, and then you get the a lot of folks in the smaller scale. But Howard, you said something earlier I think is really interesting about these various competitors and how they went to market. So it's exactly what I was talking about earlier, which is you have a need in the marketplace that isn't being met, and then a business organizes in a way to meet that need. And the ones that are really successful in doing it get very focused on their business model. So you think about an affordable dentures, it's a beautiful business, and they've really honed their model to deliver their service very efficiently. Western did the same for years. Aspen does the same now. Pacific, Heartland, Smile Brands. We do that. We try to stay very focused on what is our value proposition, and then get better and better at what we do to be good at it. And that's where private practitioners can be extremely successful. They focus on that value proposition for their consumer, and they deliver a great service and a great model. So there'll always be a place for them as well. So again, it's all about this. Do we have enough models out there to take that 45% and make it 75% and make it 85%? I mean, that's the opportunity. And then everybody's, quote unquote, too busy, which is a good problem.
And even, I cut my teeth. I learned my business. My dad owned Sonic drive-in franchises, and he bought his first one when I was 10 and his ninth one when I was 20. And look at hamburgers today, just something as simple as a hamburger. How many business models are there? In-N-Out, Sonic, there's so many. No one is, it's always evolving. It's always changing. True or false? A lot of people say that in the DSMO. Do you call them DSOs or DSMOs?
Just DSO, Dental Service Organization.
A lot of people say that they're 2/3 of the dentists are female, 65%.
It's not quite 65%. I think you could probably look at new dentists coming in, and you're definitely pushing over 50. But in terms of the overall base, at least in our world, I don't know everybody else's exact base, but I'd say we're about 50-50.
So then you guys are 50-50, and that's what's coming out of the dental schools, basically 50-50. So a lot of people are saying that millennials are different than baby boomers like me. I'm 54. A lot of people say, well, your generation wanted to own your own shop, own your own business, and wear all those hats. Because when you own your own business, it's a lifestyle. It doesn't stop at 5 o'clock. I mean, sometimes if I ever got a phone call at 5 o'clock in the morning, that meant one of my employees was calling in sick. I mean, it's a total lifestyle. And a lot of people are saying that a lot of the millennials don't want the lifestyle their father or their mother had, and they want an 8 to 5 job. Other people say that's not true. They want to own their own building, but they have too much student loan debt. Do you think the millennials coming out have a different view on practice ownership than the baby boomers before them?
In my experience, that's been a little bit overrated, sort of the mindset shift, or the next generation's the one that's going to take us to hell in a handbasket. I think that's been happening, probably since we left the caves. It's always the next generation.
Right.
Doesn't have our work ethic, doesn't want to do all. I haven't noticed that. Like, we bring in, young dentists. They're hardworking. They want to serve patients. Actually, in my experience, dentists were always. One of the reasons I've stayed in dentistry for 20 years, I love dentists. They're very big-hearted, hardworking people who want to do the right thing and want to work hard. So I haven't seen anything change in the mindset of people coming out of dental school. Just haven't. You've seen some demographic changes, like you alluded to a moment ago, with a skew more towards female, which is great. And you've seen a big change economically in terms of, people graduating 20 years ago with no debt, and people graduating now with $500,000 in debt. That certainly changes how quickly you can go into private practice. But the other thing that's changed is there's more options for them. So it used to be go find an associateship or buy someone's practice. Now there's lots of places to go work. So I think it's just options that have created that. I haven't noticed a lower work ethic. I haven't noticed anything of the sort. Is there a push towards wanting to own? Maybe. I think you have more models, and people look and say, I'd like to try something else. You look at like the physician models. There's so many, what percentage of physicians are quote unquote employed in another organization? It's a much bigger number. Dentistry organizes in a way where you don't need to do that as much because there's not as much outside coordination, if you will, between a hospital system and a payer and some of those things. So dentistry will always have, I think, a more accessible private practice model than you might see in medicine. But I just think people like choice, and then they find what fits them well. And we have tons of, I sign anniversary cards every month here, and I get a big stack of them. And I can tell you, I sign 20 and 30-year anniversary cards for dentists, by the handful every month, because people settle in the model and they really love it, and it's right for them. Others, have moved on and opened private practices and are very successful doing that. So, again, like I was saying earlier with the retail models or the food models, there's just always going to be, in a healthy market, there'll be lots of different choices for providers and lots of different choices for patients. And again, I keep going back to that. If 45% of the country's in regular care, we've got to have our minds open to the fact that more models, more choices is going to be better for everyone, the country overall and the country's overall health. Because if we really believe in dentistry, which I know I do, I know you do, I know the people that are taking the time to listen right now certainly do, then we've got to get that service to be more ubiquitous than it is today. And so more models, more efficiency does that.
So, business in 3 words is supply and demand. What is your core competency? What are you seeing that American patients want and need? And what is your focus? What are you guys trying to do?
So our biggest mission is to say, dentists, sometimes the variety of your capabilities can be your biggest detriment or roadblock to success. Dentists are incredibly smart human beings, and they're incredibly capable human beings. So they can do lots of things, but that doesn't mean that lots of things are their highest and best use. So I talk to people all the time. I say, I understand a bit about dentistry. I understand a bit about the business of dentistry, but my ability to actually do dentistry is zero. I can't do dentistry. So there's no way, no matter how much time I spend around dentistry, no matter how much time I spend talking to you about dentistry, I can't do it. So you have these people with these gifts that were given by God, right, in their hands to do these amazing things, and that is then they've taken that skill and they've been trained in it, honed, licensed to do it. It's highest and best use. So if a dentist is spending half of his or her time doing administrative work, there's someone who can do that, let's just say equally as well, who spent more time doing it, say 25, 30 years learning the business of dentistry, that can support that dentist so that he or she can be spending his or her time using the hands, the miracle, to pass those miracles on to people. So if you think about that, how do you go to market? Well, there's a certain number of dentists in the country, and it's not a huge number, right? 120 some odd thousand probably practicing on a full-time basis. If we can make or help make the ones that we work with more efficient, because they're spending more of their time working with patients and less of their time doing anything administrative, meaning moving towards that highest and best use, that's our kind of core mission, if you will. So that is what we think how dentists can move towards their core purpose of their mission, create more true miracles every day. And we see it in our organization every day. We have a phrase we use called celebrate everyday miracles, because it's remarkable things that are happening around the organization every day when our docs are encountering patients and they're just doing what they do best. It's amazing the stuff that happens. So we want more and more time skewed that direction. So that I think is the biggest thing. Then what does a patient want, which was the other part of your question. What a patient wants is make it convenient for me. So I want great service. I want it now. I want it to be convenient. I'd like it to be one-stop shop, right? So let's make it simple for me. And I want to hear the word yes from you. I want you to tell me yes. Yes, you can get me in today. Yes, you can provide the service I want. Yes, you can provide good pricing. Yes, you can provide consumer financing. Yes, you can get me to a specialist if I need a specialist. So they want it to be convenient. Now, is that really changed that much over time? Probably not. What's changed is there's more options out there. So there's more opportunity for people to encounter that. What's also changed is people are spending way more money on healthcare than they used to out of their pocket. So it's a more taxed environment. So I think making it efficient, making it easy, getting them in, that's what I think patients want.
I think it's because of less children. At the end of World War II, the average American mom had 5.5 children. So only the kid in the most pain or the girl with the most crowded teeth got ortho. But as we switched to only 2 kids, now both kids can get ortho. But when you talk about convenience, dentistry in America is absolutely not convenient when 8% of hospital emergency room visits are odontogenic in origin. I mean, I think it's sad. I live in Phoenix, 3.8 million metro, and on Sunday, it's better to break a leg than to get a toothache, because if you broke a leg, the ambulance will be there. They'll take you to the hospital fully staffed on Christmas, Easter, and Hanukkah. But why are emergency rooms 8% of emergencies or odontogenic in order? So the industry, you'd have to say, gets an F on convenient hours. I mean, how could you give it anything better than an F if 8% of emergency room visits are tooth related?
Well, but that kind of goes to that 45% issue. What percent of that 8% were emergent problems over time?
Oh, sure.
Meaning if they were going to the dentist regularly or at all, then it wouldn't have ended up that way. So, and that's probably the overwhelming majority of them were these problems that accreted over time, right? So it's this access issue. So is it affordable? Is it convenient? Is there a model that welcomes everyone in, or does it feel like an inaccessible model? So there's always a place, again, for a high-end private practice, but there needs to be a place for, everyday folks to come as well.
I just think it's bizarre that in a hospital they could remove a tumor out of my brain, they could give me a bypass, they could fix a broken leg, and then when it comes to my mouth, it's like it's a different species. It's like I think that's the other bizarro part of the deal. A lot of my homies are probably wondering, do you manage when you say you manage 400 offices, does that mean that you own the office and their employees, or does that mean, or is it different for every state because of all the legalities? Do some of these offices, do you just do the back office paperwork? Explain what you actually technically do, and is it different in every state due to all the state laws and regulations?
So it can be a little bit different state by state, but there's some general truisms, if you will, broadly. And there's lots of different types of DSO support type models. So it can vary, but generally speaking, if you think about the DSO model, the idea is to support the dentist, to free them from the administrative side of the business so that they're focused on the patient care and the relationship with their patient. So what's true of a DSO is when you get into the diagnosis and treatment of dental disease, which is practicing dentistry, DSOs don't do it. Not interested in doing it, wouldn't be good at doing it. That's what dentists are trained to do. So the whole concept of the DSO model is to say, if a dentist can be 99% of his or her time doing that, meaning caring for their patients, then efficiency has been created in the market, and therefore value has been created in the market. Therefore, the DSO is helping to create value by freeing up the dentist to be truly focused on just the care. And you have a private practice, like you said, 5 in the morning, you get the call, someone's not coming in, you're dealing with it. In a DSO supported environment, that call routes somewhere else, and you just show up at time to open and start taking care of patients. So that at its heart is what a DSO hopes to do. Then you can get into varying degrees of, does the DSO have a call center? So are the calls going to the central location and being scheduled onto the schedule of the individual office, or is the phone ringing in the individual office? But you're going to have a dentist who's independent, working for a dentist who's independent, providing that care to his or her patients, and then all the things that surround the practice of dentistry that aren't the actual treatment and care of the patient and the patient interaction, the DSO, depending on the depth of their service, can take those services off their plate. So in our case, we try to be as turnkey, quote unquote, as you can around the support side functions. So, we can build out an office, we can, make an arrangement to get good pricing on the equipment, we can, help get good pricing on supplies. We can have marketing materials. We can have an online presence. We can have call centers, central billing offices, operational support people out in the field, operational support people here at corporate. So we try to look at everything that doesn't involve the dentist being able to focus on his or her patient and routinize that, or in some way standardize it, or just have people who can deal with it when it runs off the rails, like you said, because you get the call at 5 a.m.
So the dentist and the assistant and the hygienist are all doing the wet hands as usual, and you guys are just taking over the dry hands.
Correct. That's yeah.
Do you guys, when you expand, do you do a lot of mergers and acquisitions, buying existing practices, or do you prefer the de novos and start your own from scratch?
So it's a great question, and we've done both. So the Smile Brands model, you mentioned two companies at the beginning, Smile Brands and OneSmile, which really operate together. But we have one model where we will go into an existing market and build new offices for existing groups that we work with. We have another model where I mentioned to you, you're kind of trying to get around how many DSOs are out there and how big are they and some of those kind of things. We have a model working with smaller emergent DSOs or just folks who happen to have 4 or 5 offices in a given market, who look at it and say, wow, when you go from 4 or 5 to 20 or 25, a lot changes. The ability, the level of sophistication around your support services, the confidence you have to hand bigger things off to other folks changes. So we have a joint venture model, if you will, where we will invest in a smaller dental group or DSO that has 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 locations, and invest in that business through our OneSmile venture. So invest in that business and then build it up together. So take it from, say, 4 offices to 14, 15, 20, and then create a path for another liquidity event for the owner there that we think is a lower risk liquidity event. And it's interesting, Howard, people don't do well processing risk. Like, how risky is this move from 4 offices to 14 or 20? The answer is very risky. You have personal guarantees, you're taking a lot of money, you hit bank lending limits, you have to put a lot of capital out. So that becomes a very hard leap for most folks to make. So what we like to do is say, look, we can invest side by side with you in your business and make that leap together so that you can have a lower risk path to that secondary liquidity with us. And that's what we're doing. We've done 4 deals like that. We're working on a few more. We're pretty excited about them.
So, but you're not publicly traded though. So are you part of a venture capital firm then, or?
We're private equity backed. So we have a private equity firm. In 1998, when we co-founded the business, we partnered with a private equity firm called Griffin Investors out of San Francisco. Then
is that Peter Griffin?
Griffin, G-R-Y-P-H-O-N.
Yep. Oh, get it, Peter Griffin.
Yeah, no, different. So
Family guy.
Out of San Francisco, and they just raised a new $1.5 billion fund that they're investing out of. So we're quite active in the marketplace, trying to do additional deals. So they partnered with me back in 1998 when we started the company. And then when we reacquired Smile Brands and put OneSmile and Smile Brands together in 2016, I had partnered up with them again.
So tell my homies, what's the difference between private equity and venture capitalists?
So venture capitalists generally invest pre-profitability. So when you see, the story of Google or Snapchat or Facebook, when they're getting people to invest before they have earnings, but that's generally how you think about a venture capitalist. A private equity firm invests based on multiples of earnings. They're doing what's called leverage buyouts. So they're taking the earnings of the company, and that's what they're using to lever the company and then put in additional equity. So think about it, the best dividing line is pre-profitability and then post-profitability, and then depending on the scale you're at, that'll determine the private equity firm you would type of private equity firm you would go.
When you talk about one-stop shopping, which the consumer wants one-stop shopping, do you think it's a better idea, return on investment, to take a young dentist out of school and teach them complicated stuff like placing implants? Or do you think it's faster, easier, higher quality, better to have specialists rotate through the office like periodontists and oral surgeons?
That's a great question around the specialty model versus the GP doing more. And I think, is just talking about this the other day, it's changing. I think we're headed towards more of a tipping point where it's changing more. I actually think it's better for everybody though. So I see, you look at clear aligners, which is obviously going to pull more general dentists into orthodontia. But what it does, it creates way more visibility to treating orthodontic, either malocclusion or retreatment of old orthodontia. So I think what happens is it's not really an either or. I think what happens is you pull more general dentists into the mix of doing orthodontic services in that case, which also has them see more complex cases, which they won't do, which will feed more to the orthodontist. So you'll see much more orthodontic treatment generally for people. I think the same thing with implants. I think when a general dentist sees implants because he knows he or she's capable of doing implants, it's a great product, right? It's way better than a 3-unit bridge in terms of functionality and lifestyle and moving on. So I think what you'll see is the general dentist will be able to do implants because he or she's trained, and therefore will see more implant opportunities. The general dentist will do more implants, and they'll also pass more implants that are more complex on to specialists. So I don't think it's really an either or in our case. And in our networks, we do both. So we want to have the general dentist seeing and doing everything he or she is capable of doing. And we want to have specialties who are rotating around to the offices, specialists who are rotating around to the offices who are able to do the more complex things.
So you are having the specialists rotate into the practices.
We always have, yeah. So we have all of them: orthodontics, oral surgery, endo, perio.
So what advice would you give if this is June, so everybody just graduated, 6,000 kids just walked out of school. If you met an endodontist and he was coming to Phoenix and he said, I want to live in Phoenix, that's where my family is, and endo's crowded, would you say go and buy a land and building and start your own endodontic practice like all the old guys did? Or would you say, you know what I'd do? I'd go find the 5 biggest offices in Phoenix and do a day a week each one of those. You won't have any real estate, no debt. You won't have to manage. I mean, it's like a DSO, your own DSO. I'm just going to go in and work as a independent contractor. What would you advise a specialist walking out of school today?
Yeah, walking out of school, I would say go find multiple practices and rotate through. I think there could be a point in time downfield where you've now decided, okay, this is the exact corner of Main and Main I want to be on. I've got referral sources all around me, and I just want to have a fixed location. But I personally think you're way better off managing the risk down. Remember I said earlier, human beings I don't think are very good at processing risk. You think about the risk of building out a practice, picking a single location, assuming you're going to get enough referral flow into that single location to be successful, and carrying that overhead. So I think it's much cleaner and lower risk to go to multiple practices, do the day a week that you were alluding to, and then really just defer that decision to invest in a fixed location until there's more certainty. Now, you may find there's no reason to ever do it because the lifestyle works, the income flow works, and you're in great shape, and your risk is highly mitigated. Or you may find 2, 3, 5 years down the field that where you want to be, and you've got it figured out, and you do it.
What do you think a dental office ideal overhead? What would you put for labor, lab, supplies, marketing, facility? What's your benchmark? What's doable? Not what would be the unicorn scenario, but what should be achievable?
So, and this is always got to be careful because sometimes the language can be different, right? So we think of labor running about 50%.
That includes the doctor, though.
That includes the doctor for his or her production time. So if you put, the same rate you'd pay an associate to do the production in there, even if you're doing it yourself, but burden yourself against that labor the same way you'd pay an associate relative to their production. I think of that as about 50%. Then the remainder of the overhead is going to run, in the 30% range. So you got kind of 80% all in with a 20 kind of weighting at the bottom, if you will, for profit, but that's after all the production is
So,
paid.
but would you say 20% profit, is that EBITDA? Is that earnings before
I think
interest?
about it as EBITDA. Yeah.
So that's
EBITDA.
earnings before a lot of other expenses, earnings for interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization.
Correct.
But
But after the doc is paid for the production time, so the owner would have income in that, ahead above that line, if you will.
yeah. So break down that 30%. So would you say staff 20 of that 50%? Is that half dentists, half staff?
Little more than half dentist, and then so call it 65, 35 probably.
65% dentist?
Of the 50, I'm sorry, the 50 we're talking about.
Right, 65% of the 50 for the dentist, and 35% of the 50 for the staff.
And hygiene.
And that 30%, could you break that down? Can you break out any numbers of the rent, advertising, facility?
Yeah, we tend to be a retail-driven model, so we like highly visible real estate. So we're running about 10% in that real estate component. And then the other 20 is broken down between labs and supplies and financing fees, if you've got sort of a care credit type model, something like that. And then just miscellaneous would make up probably the balance, the 5%-ish.
And you're managing 400 dentists or 400 locations?
Locations.
And are you in the real estate business? I mean, would you, if you had it all your way, would you like to own the land and building of all those locations? Or would you say, I'm not in the real estate business, I'd prefer to just lease 400 locations?
So, and then my background goes to being a finance executive. So, way back in the day. So, the answer is a little nuanced. If you're us, because of the cost to capital relationship, it's better to lease the facility and then just support the business of dentistry, not go and own the real estate. That's because the way we're capitalized. If I was a single practitioner who owned my business and I had a location I owned, you can start to see real value in acquiring the piece of land and paying yourself rent. Now you're locking yourself in, so you want to make sure this is where I want to be. But as long as you know it's where you want to be, then there could be real value because that real estate over time, if you assume that real estate is going to appreciate over time. So if you're in an area where you see real estate appreciation, then I think it makes sense. You got to be a little careful with that, though. Then you get into folks who have larger DSOs, and they want to build it over time. Then they can build a nice real estate portfolio owning the offices they're in. It's a little different in our structure.
I own my land and building, but I don't even know why. Because when I grew up, my dad was in Sonics, and in the same Catholic church was Dan and Beverly Carney, the founders of Pizza Hut, and he had 2,800 locations. And every time I would talk to Dan about the land and building, he said he only would buy the land and building. It was some small dinky town of 5,000. He had no options. But he said, man, if you're in Wichita, why, he hated the real estate business. He just wanted he said, I can make 5 times as much money in the pizza business. What the hell do I want to be in the real estate business for? But he was a stickler that focus your money on your business, and you're not in the real estate business. And back to that, a big a question a lot of these dentists have is some of the expensive technologies. Have you found a return on investment on, like CAD CAM is $100,000 plus decision. So is CBCT. So is some of these lasers are $85,000 to $100,000. In your 400 offices, what % did you make the investment of CAD CAM, CBCT, lasers, or other high-end technologies, or oral scanning instead of impression taking?
Yep. So they're great. It's a great question, and we tend to find you don't want to be, in our experience, the first mover on those things at that big of a scale. So it's kind of a crawl, walk, run mentality. So you see things that are clearly the future, right? Digital radiography. You're certainly not going to be developing film in an office. So that's a kind of a no-brainer to move forward with. When you get into digital impressions, for example, clearly the technology's ready. It's moving in the right direction. So we're investing heavily in that area to move in that direction. You get into in-office milling. I think there's a choice. So some folks have moved fully into it and embrace it heavily. In our experience, it hasn't been something we've wanted to go fully into. So we experiment with it, but we haven't seen it tip over where that's where we want to be fully invested. So we try to look somewhat carefully at that and just make sure that the technology
Well,
is
it's a genius answer because digital radiography, half the market, more than half of all the dentists adopted it. But CAD/CAM, it's sitting around 10 or 15%.
Right, and so we're looking at it when you go all the way to CAM. We say, oh, we're not ready for that. It's a small penetration. There's a deep training curve. The digital impressions, we're starting to see that move to be, closer to the center of the curve. So we're kind of more attracted to that. But again, I think we like to be right in the middle of the curve in terms of that adoption pace, to make sure we understand it, to make sure the docs are fully trained on it, to make sure it's where we want to be given the scale we're at.
So what if one of my homies is driving to work right now and says, Steve, I just want to do dentistry. I love dentistry. I like surgery. I just want to pull root canals. And I'm really getting burned out and fried on the business, the marketing, the advertising. I hate it. Are you an option for these dentists? I mean, if they, what would they, how does that work? Do they go to, and what would they find if they went to your website, smilebrands.com? Is there a place to learn more about handing over the dry hand activities to you so they can just focus on the wet hands?
There is to a degree on there. I mean, it certainly gives them a feel for our culture and our business, and there's individual brand sites they can go through from there to see how the brands operate, and they can learn more about us. They can also just, it's pretty easy. You got the smilebrands.com, you got the steve.bilt. So steve.bilt at smilebrands.com. What I'd probably do is take that, and I can connect them with the right person to be more one-on-one in explaining what we do and how it might fit their particular set of circumstances, whether that meant they just said, look, I just want to find a location and come join you, or one of your groups, or I've got locations and I'd like to think about putting those together with your group. And we do both of them, all the way from individuals who just come join, all the way to small groups that we put capital into and grow with them. So both of those are options, and we have couple different paths that I connect them to have that conversation.
And here's how you remember Steve Bilt's name. My favorite business author of all time is Jim Collins, and it's the first book I ever fell in love with in business, Built to Last. Then he did Good to Great. Then he did How the Mighty Fall. And now what's his last one? Good to Great, Become Greater. What was, and anyway, have you ever considered changing your last name from B-I-L-T, Bilt, to add a U, and say you were named after the book Built to Last?
I'd love to be able to make that claim, but no, I try to say, somewhere in Ellis Island, I think it got shortened from Vanderbilt or Biltmore, and I keep trying to, ping those guys and see if I can get in on the inheritance, but so far, no luck.
Well, I have read by people who have PhDs in this area that 80% of the people who came through Ellis Island could not read or write. So they would say your name and somebody was phonetically sounding it out. So it was, anybody's guess what your real last name is. So how many states are you in? And could this guy call you from Beaumont, Texas to Parsons, Kansas? Or how many states are you in for an acquisition? If someone says, I've already got office. I've been in Parsons, Kansas for 20 years, Steve. I got patients. How many states are you in?
We're in 17 right now, and then we're interested in, all of them. So, it's just a matter of having the right fit. So if we're not in the state, it was a single office, that's a hard kind of entry point to come in. If we're not in the state and there's 4 or 5 to partner with, then we could enter that way. If we're in the state, then anything could possibly work.
So you started in Irvine. So are you mostly like a Southwest play, like California, Arizona? Are you more Southwest, or what? Where are you concentrated in the most?
We're coast to coast, so we tend to refer to it as the Smile Belt around here affectionately. So if you started in Washington and drew a big smile across the country, coming from Washington down through Southern California, across through Texas, We're very big in Texas, 125 or so facilities in Texas. Move through Texas all the way through Florida, and then smile up to the West Coast, and then dot a couple of I's in the Ohio markets. You start to get into roughly what our map looks like.
So a lot of them are probably also wondering, do you run 400 locations with the same practice manager software? I mean, is this like Dentures off the shelf, EagleSoft? I mean, or did you have to develop your own practice management system, or what do you run these offices off of?
Well, so we have a core on a few different platforms, including QSI is one of the platforms. We also wrote our own software program that is inside our company called eSmile. So that's inside our business. And then we have an overlay over the top of that, which then takes all of that and connects it to our call center outbound calling and software programs that we've written, or our central business office programs that we've written. So there's a number of programs that we've created over the top of whichever clinical information system that we happen to be working with, that grabs the data, and then we're able to aggregate it and see it in a single view outside of that clinic information system.
But the foundation was QSI.
QSI is where we started. And then we wrote one as well, and then through various acquisitions, we have a number of other programs, all the ones you would know, that we integrate ourselves into.
So I'm trying to get this. So let's say you bought a dental office and they were on Dentures. Would they still be on Dentures, or would you convert them to your deal?
Right now, they just still be on Dentures. And then what we would do is we'd put our overlay over the top of it to pull information.
So you've written bridges. So if they're on Dentures or EagleSoft, or Open Dental, you've written bridges to go in there and pull out that information for you to manage.
So pull that data into a central database, and the database is going to, all the other programs that we have over the top that'll hit that database and pull the information.
But so to your knowledge of the members of the American Dental Services Organization, do you know any of these 35 members that run all these offices that can do it with an off-the-shelf Dentures or EagleSoft, or has everyone had to go back and program their own practice management metrics to run it?
You can't really be purely off the shelf. So you have to have something to get that data out to create the management reports you need. The biggest challenge tends to be when you go to do the billing and collecting more centrally to leverage that. Most of these programs aren't written to do these things centrally, so you tend to run into some challenges there. And then also just the view you want to have to be able to provide the support for the offices that you want. So I don't think anyone just grab the program off the shelf and is able to use that to run, to support multiple offices, or certainly not 20 or 30 offices or 40. So,
I know, and every time Dentures or EagleSoft ask my homies, like, well, what do you want us to program? They never ask for anything an MBA one. It's always like, well, can you change the font to fuchsia? And I went Helvetica. I mean, they don't even know what they don't know. I mean, I used to get so mad at Shine. And so finally, Stan Bergman sent this amazing person with an MBA to my office. We talked, and she said, I don't think that the market agrees with what you're saying. So she did a survey, and they spent money to shut me up. And they did the survey, and sure enough, they're right. Not one of my homies agreed that they should know their cost, their labor, their supplies. I mean, they just whatever. But
all the DSOs would agree with you.
I know, and that's
what
one
we've
of the
had to
reasons.
invest so much money in developing over the top of it.
It's like talking to dentists. It reminds me of my two oldest sisters are Catholic nuns. You could talk to them for 40 days and 40 nights and not change your opinion on anything. I mean, a dentist, they just want to do dentistry. And but back to the lab and supplies. Did you think it was earth-shattering that out of nowhere last year at the Greater New York, Amazon had a big booth there? I mean, you'd heard rumors about this for 3 or 4 years, but I mean, they were at the Greater New York meeting. What do you think that signals? I mean, they wouldn't go there unless Jeff Bezos had dentistry on his bullseye target somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta believe that they've looked at, it's a huge category, and I gotta believe they've looked at it and said, I think they're studying it, quite frankly. So is there, some places you can bifurcate this category to buy commodity products for a really good price? I think it's a good thing for private practice dentists to look at that and say, or probably for all the dentists should look at that and say, their history is they come in, costs come down. So that should be attractive, right? Because you've got, global visibility that'll be created for the smaller guy, because the technology is certainly there with the way Amazon works. Now, I think buying, all the things that dentists buy creates a level of complexity. There's more to it than just, the most commoditized products. Obviously, there's complex things in there. So I think it'll be an evolution, probably. But I would never underestimate them. Obviously, if they've been pretty successful doing what they do and putting their attention to it, I think will certainly change things over time, for sure.
But I think, but it looks like that industry's in pain. I mean, Patterson, their stock has been hammered, basically, and they just let their CEO go. Do you think that's partly related to Amazon or the increasing competition, or do you think there's been a fundamental shakeup of the dental supply business model, that Amazon's at the Greater New York, and not long after, Patterson sales are going down? And do you think those two events are related somehow?
I don't think those two are directly related. So I think it's a multifaceted question. So you say, wow, how would I feel if I was running a dental supply company and Amazon was talking about coming in? There'd be a little sweat on my brow, I'm sure. That wouldn't be my number one thing to hear. So that would be for sure. I think, Patterson is a great company, and they've made a lot of moves to start to see the DSO trend. But anytime any business goes through significant or even, tectonic kind of shifts where you say, wow, I've got to now serve a much broader market, that's a high degree of difficulty dive. So I don't know the particulars of what went on inside Patterson. But I think anytime you try to make that big of a shift, I just put something out the other day, an article I wrote on LinkedIn the other day, where I said, is it more important to prepare your business for the discontinuous change of the future, or to make the incremental change that you need to make to continue to be more competitive serving your customers today? I put an or in the middle for a reason, but the answer to that question is yes. You have to do both. It's really hard. It's the hardest thing you do, is like, how do I keep serving my customers and getting better incrementally with all the things they want? And then how do I deal with what's going to be this discontinuous change? It's really tough, and you got to do both. So, when you're in leadership and you try to navigate that, it's hard. You try to navigate that as a public company, it's that much harder. So, I think Patterson's a great company. I think Shine's a great company. I think they've done a great job, serving our industry in total. I think they have, to varying degrees, specialized in understanding DSOs over the years. Shine more so historically, Patterson more so recently. And Patterson, I think, is just dealing with that transition. But again, I think it's a great company, great culture, and I think it'll be great over time, for sure.
Yeah, and I thought the man who took it public, Pete Frechette, was one of the greatest men who ever served in dentistry. Whenever I go visit my sister in a cloistered Carmelite monastery in Lake Elmo, I have to do something for 4 hours to 1 minute. So I usually go by and sit in Pete's office for 4 hours and 1 minute to make it a tax man, or I'd go sit with the scientists at 3M. But that Pete Frechette, he was the most intelligent, logical, just the fact. I mean, God, he was just an amazing legend. I sure miss that guy.
You left behind a huge footprint at that company that they honor. They really, they do honor that there. So they think
also, but they always say that, there are known knowns. There are things that you know. There are known unknowns, things that you don't know. Then there are unknown knowns, and there's unknown unknowns. I always like to point out the things that all the corporates are doing that my homies don't do. One of the things they all do is they have a call center. And I know that every dentist in America, because I lecture to them every week, they can't tell you how many incoming calls they had last month. They can't tell you how many of them went to voicemail. They can't tell you how many of them came in after hours. They can't even tell you how many of the people that left the voicemail, if anybody even listened to the voicemail. But I'll tell you one thing, guys like you understand incoming calls, and you have your call center, and I bet you have people that only focus on those numbers. What do you think? Tell us about your call center, because these dentists are like, what the hell's the call? Why do you have a call center?
Well, the most fundamental reason, which goes to what you're talking about, is we spend money to make the phone ring. So if you're going to spend money to make the phone ring, you ought to be pretty darn serious about what you're getting out of it. So that's the first thing is, we know
But
how
see,
much does it
I'll
cost.
stop you there. It doesn't matter, because if the crown doesn't fit, it's always the lab's fault. The dentist never thinks it's this horrible impression. And if I spend money at a marketing agency and I don't get any new patients, it's not my fault. The marketing didn't work. They don't, so they don't know what they don't know.
Well, and that's the challenge, right? So it's like, think about it. You're spending money. You're not spending money for the new patient. You're spending the money for the opportunity to gain a new patient. And I think you said it really well. It's a mental model. So how's your mental model set? I paid marketing to get me a new patient. If that's your mental model, you're going to be very inefficient. If your mental model is, no, I paid marketing, whatever it is, marketing dollars to get the phone to ring, to get an opportunity to get a new patient, now I better be really serious about each step of that process, and you should be looking at 4 or 5 or 6 steps of that process, not just the one you alluded to, which is, did I get the new patient? Start with, did I get someone to at least engage with me? Click, call, whatever it is, and then how did I do through that chain in performance? Then you're starting to move towards a shot of efficiency. So so we do study that closely. What does it cost to make the phone ring? What does it cost to get someone to click on an ad? What happens once that phone rings? First of all, did we answer it? What's our ring no answer percentage, right? What went to voicemail? What did we follow up on? How many of those people became patients? Once they become a patient, which ones schedule, which ones don't? What do we say on the phone that led the patients to say, I'll think about coming in and then not come in, versus what we said on the phone to get people to actually come in and try out the practice. So there's a lot to that, but again, I think it's breaking it down to smaller component parts, not just that end game you mentioned, which was, did you become a new patient? How much did you spend, right? It's more, did you create an opportunity? And what did I do with it as an operator?
There's a couple of new companies. One of them is on these incoming calls, realizing that about half, there's 168 hours in a week. The average dentist only open 32 hours a week. That's only 19% of the week. And that half the incoming calls are coming in when you're not even open. And this good old boy from Louisiana started a online schedule. Are you adding the ability for consumers to schedule their own appointment on your website?
So we have right now the ability for them to request it, and then we match them up with the request. We are in beta right now with a technology we call Open Book, which allows them direct access to the schedule across not just one, but multiple offices to help select their appointment. So we do have a beta test going right now of that exact technology. Right now they can request it and we book them and then confirm back and get them moving on everything. So it's convenient. We're going to take it one step further and let them actually directly into the schedule.
So you plan on making, you plan on letting them actually schedule their own appointment down the road?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you have to look at, are you making it as convenient as you possibly can for a patient? And we think the way we do it now is marginally convenient because they request it, we match them up, make sure we meet their needs, take their insurance, do those kind of things. But we think we can make it one step more convenient for them through this, what we call Project Open Book, which is technology we have to really expose it.
Project Open Book. So you opened a can of worms. You said, do we take your insurance? What is your insurance policy? Do you take every PPO, Medicaid, Medicare? How do you evaluate whether or not you'll take an insurance or not?
We try to be, in the middle of the curve. We try to make sure everyone can get access to a dentist. So we take virtually all insurance, probably as wide a choice as anybody out there in the marketplace. So we take virtually all insurance. Medicaid would be select locations. So we do that in a couple of states. So we're not a big Medicaid practice. We're about 6% governmental overall in the whole system, so it's pretty small. But in given markets, we take more of it, depending on the needs set around the individual office. So we're looking kind of around the individual office, what people need. But virtually all PPO, virtually all DHMO, and then we have very robust discount plans that we offer, or discount plans that we take. And then we have our own internal financing vehicle as well through what we call Smile Brands Finance. So we'll come even behind Care Credit and literally make sure every patient qualifies for some level of credit with us. So we really try to make it as accessible, as ubiquitous as we can.
So what percent of your patients finance their dentistry?
Finance it, well, about half of what patients get in total is paid for by patients, and about half of that is paid for through financing. So call it 25%, 25% would be financed at some level.
So probably 50% in revenue is insurance, 25% patient out of pocket, 25% finance?
That's pretty fair, yeah.
And is your own in-office discount plan or in-office membership program, is that seem to be growing and becoming more significant, or is it more flat?
It's starting to grow. So we're seeing, a bigger need there. People are open to it. It's actually a really good value for folks. So that's actually a nice growth area.
Well, I want to tell you this. I still have not been able to get one dental insurance CPO to come on the show. And I even waived my speaking fee and spoke to their annual meeting. And I get it, because they won't tell you this, but if you go to the bar and drink with them till 3 o'clock in the morning, this is what they'll say. They'll say, we give this dental office $100,000 a year for the last 20 years. I only hear from this dentist twice a year, and it's because I didn't cover something, and he writes me then. Sometimes they even have letters in their briefcase or print out emails. And so the dentists have been so mean to the insurance companies. It's like they won't even network. There's none on Dental Town. I mean, they're registered members. I know every member that's registered. They if I do a trace on, on your email address with Delta Dental, whatever. But so dentists have burned them. It's almost like the Israelis and the Palestinians. I mean, they've been feuding forever, and they're not going to talk. But I really, when corporate dentistry took off, a lot of the corporates were getting bad-mouthed by dentists, a lot of them on Dental Town. And I just thought it was so cool that you come on the show, that Rick Workman comes on the show, Steve Thorne, because you guys aren't bad guys. You're serving Americans. You're employing dentists that sell you their practice. They didn't have to. There was a mutual trade. I mean, I just think it's amazing, and I've had so much feedback that it was so nice for just dentists to be able to put a face behind a company, to sit there and say, oh, that's who Heartland is, or that's who Pacific is, and oh, that's who the Smile Brands is, Steve Bilt. And I wish you would tell your other CEOs that we're all in this together. I call it the remote control. At the end of the day, the only thing, the remote control, no one knows how to work the remote control, because every department comes and gets their buttons on. Like, they come from TV and cable and VCR. And next thing you know, you got 85 buttons on there, and Einstein and Newton couldn't work the VCR. And it's the same thing in dentistry. There's all these silos, but the only reason I went to school was for the patient. And we're all serving the patient, whether you're dental insurance, a dentist, a specialist, whoever. I mean, we're only did 8 years of college to help our patients, and I think you're helping a lot of patients. And tell your other CEOs of those DSOs that we all are in this together, and invite them to come on the show. And thank you so much for talking to my homies today, Steve. I think you're an amazing guy, and I thought this was extremely informative, and every dentist on earth could learn a lot from someone managing 400 offices, and you sure taught everyone a lot. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
It was my pleasure, Howard. Thanks so much for having us. You couldn't have said it better. I think we're all in this together. Again, if 45% of Americans got dental care and we all get in this together, and that number goes up, then we've had successful careers. We've done something to impact people. We've left that footprint or that dent in the universe, as Steve Jobs would say. If we can move that number together. And that's really what we would love to see happen. That's what I know, my compatriots in this business would love to see. And I know, like you said, that's why all your townies went to dental school, is to do this, right? Is to serve folks. So if we can expand that marketplace, get that incredible miracle that they're capable of delivering to more people, then hallelujah. That's why I'm in it. It gets me out of bed.
No one ever went to dental school to read a balance sheet and make payroll. I mean, end of story. Thanks again. Have a rockin' hot day.